Oh my
right?
gosh. Okay, hold on.
Uh huh.
We gotta dig there, and that was not part of the plan. But
Okay.
that what you just said right there is so freaking important. And it's a big part of why I started this podcast because and
Wow.
my
Wow.
program overall is because so many people are unhappy. And the reason why they're unhappy is because they're ignoring their calling, their purpose, the movement
There
that
you
they're
go.
supposed to start. You're listening to the Presidential Experience Podcast, the place where we chronicle man's search for meaning over money. I'm your host, Kanae Corder, National Certified Counselor and Clinical Hypnotherapist specializing in financial therapy for high achievers. As a former Morgan Stanley financial advisor, I realized that high achievers needed help with more than just the numbers. And I bring a unique set of skills to my private practice as I guide CEOs and high achievers on how to manage their stress so they can enjoy their success. I want to bring some of that to you here. So each week, we'll start a discussion addressing one of the top stressors for high achievers. You've built a stellar resume. Now it's time for you to build a stellar life. Your hard work brought you money. Now it's time to turn that money into meaning here on the Presidential Experience Podcast. Welcome back, my Prosperos. Have you been thinking about starting a movement? Have you been thinking about what significance you are going to have in the world? I know. That's why you listen to this podcast, because you really are making an impact. And today we're going to talk about how you do that, give you some actionable steps, some real tools, and really like a step by step process of what it takes to start a movement, because your heart is in the right place, but we got to get your head and your feet in the same place where your heart is and get you moving, not just thinking about starting a movement, but doing it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm bringing on a guest that knows all about this because he's in a currently starting a movement, but he's also been in other movements. So I want to introduce to you Bruce George. He is an entrepreneur, a speaker, author, executive producer, writer, poet, and social activist. He has won multiple poetry and talent contests, as well as awards like the Peabody Award, the Mikey Award, the Tony Award. All for, you may know, Russell Simmons Presents Def Poetry Jam that came on HBO years ago. That's actually where we met. Yes, 20 or so years ago, exactly. We were 1 year old when we met. I know, don't do the math. Long time ago, we met, and Bruce actually interviewed me to be one of the poets on Def Poetry Jam. And that was right before it ended. And since then, we've stayed in touch over social media. That's why social media is so powerful. We stayed in touch over social media. And that's how I found out and learned about Bruce's newest movement, Genius is Common. And Genius is Common means that all beings have a genius in them, and it manifests in they manifest it in their own unique way. So we're going to talk about that today and much, much more. So today, I think you're going to enjoy being able to learn how to start a movement, get some tips and tools from Bruce George. And we're here to learn about his latest endeavor as well. And we're going to get a little personal and address some of the stresses that come with being a visionary and starting a movement, because it's not always grace and ease. So let's be real, like we are here on the Presidential Experience Podcast. So please join me in welcoming our guest today, Bruce George. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, good day. Good day. How are you, Connect?
I am awesome. I am like so excited, and I know you are too, because we've been talking about
Absolutely.
this for a few weeks, and finally we're going to get it recorded and like spark some inspiration for those who want to start a movement or even join a movement.
Well, first of all, I want to shout out. I want to shout you out for having me on your Presidential Experience podcast. I want to thank God for blessing us to be here first and foremost. I want to thank you, listeners, for listening in, and this is going to be a fun ride. And so I really appreciate you having me. Definitely.
You're welcome. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And yes, I think they will totally enjoy what we're about to talk about and continue the conversation because what we do here is spark. This is not it. They're gonna go from here, connect with you, do something on their
Right.
own. Yeah, and that's what I'm most excited about.
Absolutely. Same here. So ask away. I'm definitely, ready to just really get it in and just to really feed your listeners as I'm being
Absolutely.
fed.
So you may know that the first question we ask every guest is, what is your idea of prosperity? Or what does the
Okay,
word prosperity mean to you?
to me, because I have a very strong relationship with God, prosperity to me is carrying out my work ministry because it's not about the I, it's about the we. It's not about the pardon me. It's not about the I, it's about the we. It's not about the individual. It's about the collective. So for me, prosperity is carrying out God's will through my work ministry. It's a great question, by the way.
Mm,
Where a lot of people they get it real twisted in the sense that they were gifted with gifts and talents and callings, and they have a tendency to internalize it as though it's all about them and them, right? No, it's not about you. It's about the movement. And service is the rent you pay for being on earth. So for me, it's about being able to carry God's will out through my work ministry. Again, that was a
mm.
great question.
Thank you. Yeah, I do love that question. And I get so many different answers, and each one of them seems so powerful because everybody has a different idea of prosperity. Different prosperity means different things to different people, but it's
Right.
also personal. And
Hmm.
and I learn something every time I get an answer to that question. So I do love it. Now,
Appreciate that.
I want to go back to what we talked about, how we met, and that was Def Poetry Jam, or Russell
Hmm.
Simmons Presents Def Poetry Jam on HBO. Would you consider Def Poetry Jam or that like time around that? Would you consider that a movement?
I wouldn't necessarily consider it a movement. What I would consider it is it was a part of the zeitgeist in terms of where the world was at that time. You're talking over a quarter of a century ago. And around that time, this is before 9/11, the world was we caught the world in a very reflective state, around that time in terms of the fact that, people were reflective about their careers, reflective about their lives. And so when 9/11 happened, it couldn't come at a better time, even though that wasn't, that was a wrong thing to happen. But good things can come out of bad situations and times, right? And
Mhm.
so by 9/11 coming about, it kind of forced the world to be in a reflective state. And as a result of that, the poets on the show were able to express, you know, um, you know, uh, their worldview, their culture plus experience equals one's frame of reference. They were able to really express that to the world, to express their truth. And so as a result of that, HBO, they let us push the poetic license to do so. So I definitely want to shout out, Danny Simmons, Russell Simmons, Deborah Pointer, Stan Lathan, and others that was a part of the production, in terms of the Death Poetry Gym on HBO. And so, yeah, so we caught the word in a very reflective state. And as a result of that, I think it has really, really extended the shelf life of poetry because the poet has always been the cajoler of history. The poet has always been the truth bearer. And so, yeah, we caught the world at a great time.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll add that poetry has always been a part of life. You read when you're in elementary school and high school, you have to read these old great poets from many, 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 many years ago. But what I thought about Def Poetry Jam was it allowed you Deaf poetry made other people feel like they had a right to be poets. Before you were
Exactly.
reading the Robert Frost, those older people where you're just like, oh, poetry is dead. But it like brought it
Hmm.
back alive and gave you a voice
Hmm.
where if you weren't necessarily a rapper, especially if you weren't necessarily a rapper or a singer, this gave you a place, a platform to use your voice.
Absolutely. And you know, the thing about it, Rakim said it best. He said, rap is rhythm and poetry, right? And one reason why Russell even head nodded Def Poetry Jam in terms of putting his name behind it is because he said the following. He said, what he really appreciates about the whole spoken word world and poetry in general is that unlike rap, you can't hide behind a beat, right?
Mm,
So you have to really, really, when you write, you have to write in a way that is really going to stand on its own because there's no music per se behind it that it can hide behind. And so that was real truth, though, because of the fact that, you know, with poetry, you know, I'm talking about not having music behind it. When you're just writing regular poetry, people, you're exposing yourself, you're exposing your words to an audience that can judge or whatever they want to do, but it has to stand on its own merit. Absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah. And as I mentioned, I interviewed for the show, which meant that I was a poet. So years ago, I did discover that. I did discover that I could write. When I was 13 years old, I think I wrote my first poem when I was about 13 years
Nice.
old. And
Nice.
when I got in high school, I wrote a poem for a class, and the teacher posted the poem on the bulletin board. Like, this is an example of a poem. And I was like, holy crap.
Wow.
Like, I did not even know I was good at this. And then you post it without telling me. Like, I got a reputation to
Exactly.
keep here.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
And I didn't know that I was going to get praised for it. But all my, classmates were like, oh, wow, you wrote that. Like, they were really excited about it, which kind of gave me a little bit more, I would say, confidence or prestige in myself. I was already confident, but it
Hmm.
like added to my confidence. So my question is, what do you think? So poetry wasn't a singing, it wasn't rap, it was like its own category. And especially because New Yorkers kind of had, I would say, like they kind of cornered the market on poetry, but it opened up
Sure.
all of this, like so many different people and cultures became poetry,
Hmm.
but poetry artists. So what do you say, or what would you say about that time in poetry where it connected people? What do you think? How was that happening, that other people were able to like express themselves through poetry rather than song or rap, like the rappers or the
Right.
singers were doing?
I think a part of the gel. That's a good question again. I think a part of the gel of the Geniuses comment. I mean, I'm sorry, not Geniuses comment of Def Poetry Jam. I think a part of the gel of that is the fact that you have rappers, you have regular poets, you have spoken word artists, and it all kind of blended into one because a lot of people look at spoken word very myopically. You know, you have spoken word artists that have a rap cadence to them, and I was one of them, right? That will have
Mhm.
like a rap cadence to them. We call that spoken rap. And then you have spoken word artists that are very comedic, right? So now, they're very funny and witty in the way that they speak and in the way that they write and recite and they do their poems. So, a lot of times people will look at the spoken word world in a very monolithic way, when in fact, when in actuality, it's not. It's not a monolith. That it's very diverse. You have like people that you're like, wow, is that a rapper or is he a spoken
Mhm.
word artist, right?
Yeah.
Is he a comedian? I mean, is he a poet? Like, so
Mhm.
it really encompasses so much, and so I think that was the appeal of the show because it was relatable.
Yes, it
So many
was. It was
people can
that
relate to it.
crossover.
The crossover appeal, absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah.
It had a crossover appeal.
Yeah, and I can attest to that too, because the poem that I presented was about having sex on the first date, and so many people related to that. They were like, "Wait a minute, were you there? Like, how do you know exactly what happened?" And as far as the cadence, I think I didn't have a rap cadence, or a sing-songy voice. It was like it really was just me talking, just my voice, and it was, like I think the lyrics, if I can remember, was like, "As you touch my hips and kiss my lips, I totally forget and let you, as if I hadn't just met you. I'm sorry I say, but
Mm,
not today. And so, like, it's just me talking. It's like, and so in the
Let's do
beginning,
it.
this
Let's do it.
girl, she's like, no, she's saying all the right stuff. Like, no, can't do that. I don't know your name. Like, we don't know each other that well. And then
Right.
his little somethings, his little nothings turn into somethings. And then she starts to get more into it. And then by the end, she's like, oh man, like, I just had sex on the first date. Like, somebody save me. No, I don't want to be this person. Okay,
Exactly.
too late. Yeah.
Exactly. I
So
mean, words are powerful. Like words are power.
yes.
Like John 1:1, in the beginning was the word, and the word was God, and the word was God. So words are just like powerful. And the poet has always been the cajoler of history. The poet has always been the truth bearer. The poet has always been the flamethrower. You see, so that's why when I think it was Cicero, when he came into power, when he came into, I think it was either Cicero, or I'm trying to think, or Caesar. When Caesar came, no, it was Caesar. When he came into power, the first thing he said was kill all the poets. The
Mm,
reason why he said kill all the poets, because the poet has always been the flamethrower and the cajoler of history, has always been, the threat to the status quo, or the threat to the system, right? And
right.
so that's why Mumia Abu-Jamal said it best. He said, the state would rather me have a Uzi than a microphone, right?
Mm,
And I added to that myself, and I said, the state would rather have a million rappers talking about murder, 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 kill, 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 than have one poet talking about the day the CIA killed Lumumba, right?
mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so, that's why, yeah, we wound up getting a Peabody Award for 6 seasons on HBO and a Tony Award for the Broadway version. We did well, but it didn't last beyond what it was supposed to last, because they pulled that poetic license, because the poets were really, really speaking truth to power.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's only so long that the truth is going to be let out. And that kind of brings me to our topic
Exactly.
today, and that is the movement. And the right people have to get behind movements in order for them to flourish and to get out there, because you're
Mm-hmm.
powerful, I am powerful, and many of our listeners are powerful. But when a good group of powerful people get together, plus somebody with some influence that can really take the power of the movement forward, that's when
Exactly.
a movement is really born. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to start a movement, because what I just heard you say is the first thing
Mm-hmm.
I asked you. You said that poetry didn't quite turn into a movement. It existed. It was powerful, but it didn't quite turn
Mm-hmm.
into a movement. And so, because it fell flat, we need to talk about what are the elements of a movement. How do we move through them? And I think you and I talked a little bit about this before. And
Mm-hmm.
and my words were find a common enemy. I forget your exact words, but I think the
Okay.
first step is finding that common enemy. What would you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you in reference to that. I don't know exactly the specific quote that I quoted you. And just for your listeners, that so they can have a better understanding of myself, I was born in Harlem, raised in the Bronx. I've been living in Brooklyn for over 15 years. I'm a New Yorker to the umpteenth percentile. My work is my ministry. I'm a social activist, and lover of God, child of God, classic right brain, study every single day in every shape, form, or fashion that I can. I specialize in psychology, philosophy, classic literature, neurolinguistic programming, metaphysics, body language, the law of attraction. Specialize in power. I'm a wordsmith, word engineer, and a master quotologist. And so I just wanted to really put that out there. So if I'm coming out with these quotes and I'm sounding or anecdotal, that I'm not being pedantic. That's just really a part of me. That's not who I am. I mean, Emerson said it best: "We're not farmers, we're men that farm." Right. So I wanted to put that out there. But as far as a movement, in terms of how to start one, is your question? What is your question?
Mhm.
What is
Like, what is
okay?
the first
Specific.
question
Okay.
is what is the first step in
Well,
starting
the
a
first
movement?
step is to have an issue. That's the first
Mhm.
step, is to
Yeah.
have an issue. I mean, Ozzie Davis said it best. He said, being an African American, however, implies that something at the core of your existence is in crisis mode or will be at some point in life. And he's also said all struggles between the power to resist and the power to oppress. So before you can start a movement, you have to first have an issue. You have to have some type of issue that you feel passionate about resolving, right?
Mhm.
And, but when Ossie Davis said all struggles between the power to resist and the power to oppress, it's important that your audience understands the fact that you cannot retire from struggle. Even the Buddhists say everything enter R and enter B. Thich Nhat Hanh, Ajahn Brahm, Sadhguru, they all say the same thing, that you cannot retire from struggle, basically. Struggle is endemic to life, right?
Yeah.
So given that fact that it's endemic to life, you have to learn how to roll with the punches, roll with the punches. And then also to be a resistor. You have to learn how to resist, right? And that's where you get the Panther Party, and you get all these different movements, the Me Too movement, just so many different movements out there that is all about resisting something. And that's how the Geniuses Common movement was birthed. The way the Geniuses Common movement was birthed was from an issue. And the issue is the following. I would go around the country and I would ask the youth, when you hear the word genius, what image comes to mind? And they would always say Einstein or a light bulb or Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook. And every now and then, Kanae, I would get a Jordan. And that troubled me. And I said, you know what? Let me write a quote about that. And the quote is, notwithstanding Einstein, genius is common. And then that turned into the slogan, Genius is Common, which turned into an entire movement. As we speak, we have a presence in all 50 states, 13 countries with 17 ambassadors and growing. I kid you not. We have a presence in Jamaica, Barbados, Ghana, Kenya, Dubai, Nova, Nigeria, the UK, Canada, well, all over the place. And the Genius is Common movement is the first and only YouTube video-based movement on the planet, but we're not a video movement. On our website, we have over 765 videos from people from all walks of life, race, color, creed, sexual orientation, saying the name, saying what their genius is, and then saying Genius is Common. We're a celebrity magnet. We have over 66 celebrities that actually did Genius is Common videos. Actor Malik Yoba, Nikki Giovanni, The Last Poets, the late Tommy Ford from The Martin Lawrence Show, Bernadette Stannis, a.k.a. Thelma from Good Times, actor Dorian Wilson, comedian Rodney Perry. We even have a Genius is Common video from the first Black Bond girl from the James Bond flicks. Her name is Trina Parks, Black Don't Crack. We have one from the legendary actor Antonio Fargas, the legendary actor and film producer Bill Duke. We have one from Tarana Burke, who created the Me Too movement. 36 classic vintage rappers. You get the point,
Mm-hmm.
And so the movement got started from an issue. And I had an issue with the fact that when most people hear the word genius, they only think in terms of the Einsteins of the world, or the massive mathematicians, or the astrophysicists. That was an issue for me. And I said, you know what? I need to do something about that. And so from there, in the latter part of 2014, is when that epiphany came and it was downloaded into my spirit, where I said, you know what? Let me turn this into a movement, because people need to tear down the Berlin Wall of the word genius. So the Genius is Common movement was the first movement, metaphorically speaking, to put the word genius on trial. The first movement to tear down the Berlin Wall of the word genius and put it in the hands of the people where it belongs. So you take a young lady from a housing project that micro-braids hair like Picasso painted, that's a genius. Dave Chappelle is a genius of a comedian. Bishop T.D. Jakes is a genius of a bishop. So, Kanae, if I were to ask you, what is your genius, and we often have more than one, what is your genius?
Right. I do have more than one, but the one that I talk about most is insight. I can see inside people. I can see what they don't see inside themselves. I can hear what they're not saying. I have insight beyond measure. It's incredible.
Exactly. And you see the point, and that makes my point, that the Genius is Common movement is the first movement to basically let the world know that they've been lied to in relationship to the word genius. So when they say you're only a genius if you have 130, 140 IQ and Mensa, that's pure nonsense. That was an arbitrary number made up of Stanford University to make you 1% of the population, which is rooted in elitism. What they don't want us to know. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so then, because I want to see if I hear what you're saying. So we said number one, the first step is to kind of realize the issue, like be aware of the issue.
Realize the issue.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then as you were talking, I heard you say that really the second step then is to be bold enough to say something about it. Like you said, put it on trial.
Put it on trial. Put it into motion. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's like, then we've got to start talking about it. That is step too. So it's like, hey, there's an issue. But if we're quiet and we're meek about it, nothing's going to happen. No change, no movement. But if we say, hey, and I'm going to be the first person to put this out there, to say something about it, to, make some noise and put this thing on trial.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's keep going
Absolutely.
from there.
There's always should be, with any movement, within any movement, there should always be a call to action. Even in writing, as a writer, because the writer is the most dangerous person on the planet, right? And so even writers, some of the best of writers, their work always gives a sense of urgency. Poets, what they'll do is they'll repeat themselves to create that sense of urgency in their words. And that's one of the creative writing tactics that poets will use, is they'll repeat themselves. They'll use repetition as a way to call for action or to create a sense of urgency. So you have to have that sense of urgency because it's urgent. What we're going through in life with police brutality, racism, systemic racism. I mean, we have Agent 45 in the Lighthouse, just wreaking havoc, and that's a whole nother conversation. It's just mayhem and it's crazy. So we, as children of God and people that are about fellowshipping throughout the world to make the world a better place, we're charged with doing something, because we're riding on the shoulders of our ancestors that put their lives down for us to be able to be in this position to do the things that we're doing today. So we owe it, if nothing but to our ancestors, we owe it to them to be able to pass the mantle to our youth or to the next generation, for them to be able to let the struggle continue.
Yeah.
And so, it's about just really creating a movement is about the issue. It's about creating a sense of urgency and acting on that. Because if not, it's just a rant. And that's a big thing that I get with a lot of movements or a lot of people, so-called activists. They'll raise their fist, they'll get arrested, and then as soon as they get out of jail or whatever, then it's like there's no action. I mean, everything just stops. No, I mean, that's where it starts. I mean, you have to just keep going. Garvey said it best: agitate, agitate, agitate. He didn't say agitate. He said agitate, agitate, agitate.
Right.
It's a constant agitation in order for you to tear down the Berlin Wall of the resistance of whatever it is you're going after and going through. So the Genius is Coming movement is the first movement to let the world know that they've been lied to in relationship to the word genius. Even Einstein said we're all geniuses, and if you to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, or spend its whole life believing that is stupid. The philosopher Buckminster Fuller said it: every child is born a genius, but the process of life de-geniuses them. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer said that talent hits a target that no one else can hit, but genius hits a target that no one else can see. So we're the first movement to let the world know that the true origin of the word genius comes from the word genie out of Northern Africa, not ancient Rome. And the genie is the guiding tutelary spirit within a person. So the genius in us is the genie in us, and the genie in us is the God in us we've been lied to. So, Kanae, I don't proselytize, but I just tell people we all have a genius seed. Some call it God, which I do. Some call it source energy, for the Esther Hicks law of attraction type folk. So with that said, we're the first movement to take the elitism out of the word genius. Thus, we are an anti-elitist movement.
Everybody wants to have a private conversation. They're just having it with the wrong people. People who don't understand them. People who really aren't listening. And even if they were, they wouldn't know what to say. Maybe you're in need of a private conversation. Well, I'm here and I'm listening, and I do understand you. What if you and I could talk just all about you, and by the end of our conversation, you'll have some answers, you'll have some next steps, and you'll have some laughs, because I love to laugh, as you know, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while. So let's talk. Here's how. Go to presidentiallifestyle.com/private-conversation. Everything we talk about is confidential. Go to presidentiallifestyle.com/private-conversation. The link is in the show notes. Click the link, book your private conversation with me today, You don't have to be stressed out. I'll show you how to reach your wealth goals without sacrificing your wellness and your relationships. Building a business doesn't have to be stressful. Let's have a private conversation and I'll guide you along the way. Now that you know you're not alone, let's get back to today's show.
So I just like to recap so we can like really drive home the steps and the points. And
Absolutely.
so let me start with the last thing you said, and that the lies, right? Society often lies to us, and it could be simple lies like Santa Claus and the
Mm-hmm.
Easter Bunny and, those kind of lies. And then we grow up and we begin to challenge that, like, what? Why did you tell me there was
Mm-hmm.
a Santa Claus and it wasn't, right? And then there are lies
Mm-hmm.
like what our movement is about is that life is about hard work, and that, there's this finite amount of things in the world, and I got to get mine before you can get yours, because if you have, then I don't have. And that that
Mm-hmm.
that's a lie too. All of these lies that we've been told to us
Mm-hmm.
over the years, some of them not even spoken, like the genius is common movement or lie, because like you said, nobody actually said to you Einstein is the only genius, or only people like him are geniuses, but it's implied. And in the things that we
Mm-hmm.
do, if our IQ is in a certain way, and then a lot of times genius is around academics, just being smart enough to add a, add a certain
Mm-hmm.
amount of numbers together, or have a science background or whatever. But then there's this other side of genius that's really the deep down talent that you said is God given, is that spiritual you, that if you don't let society chip away at it, then you
Mm-hmm.
can show up in the world as this genius and start the movement that you were put here to start. Because I said that
Absolutely.
my genius was insight. So the movement that I am here to start is this. I use my gifts to help others see their gifts, because a lot of
There
times
you
what you're
go.
talking about, people can't see their gifts anymore because they have started to believe this the lies that society has told them. So if I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
wait, hold on, I get you were told that, or that was implied in your life, but here's another way to look at that. And I use hypnotherapy in order to allow people to get rid of that junk that's in front of them,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can really see down deep into themselves, their God power, that source
Mm-hmm.
energy. And but let me break down what else I heard you say. So we said already the issue or the problem, or the common enemy, and then two, you just talking it, put it on trial, you speak about it, get loud,
Mm-hmm.
and then that call to action. So yeah, you can get
Execution.
loud and scream about it, but there's got to be, okay, what do we do? So
Mm-hmm.
we're going to get the feet in there, get to moving, and then from there we got to get some urgency around it. And it says, here's the movement, but if we don't do it now, it only gets worse. Or here's the cost of not doing something about it right now. And then
Mm-hmm.
one of the last things you said was continue to agitate. Like, it's not like, okay, we did it. Now some change should happen. No, it's like, go again and again and again. All right,
Exactly.
some more. Keep going until that movement does begin to move on its own. But it takes a while for that to
Mm-hmm.
happen. So how do you
Mm-hmm.
stay dedicated to a movement?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, you're such a dope listener. I'm like, wow. When you were wrapping up my words, I was like, oh, I said that. But real talk though, you're a very effective listener. I
Thank
mean,
you.
the way you do it is, the way I stay consistent with it is because of the fact that I'm passionate about freedom.
Mm,
Period. And if I don't do the work that I'm doing, not only am my people are not going to be free, I'm not going to be free. And the truth goes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed, then it is violently opposed, and then it is accepted as self-evident.
mm,
And so when you're on this path, you have to trudge through that. The fact that not everybody's going to get it right away. Not everybody's going to come on board right away. And it's not meant for everybody to come on board. But you have to be so focused, and you have to have blinders on in terms of what it is that you're passionate about, that everything else, either they're on the way or they're in the way. That's my attitude. You know what I'm saying? And I had the faith of Job, right? And so you have to have faith. You have to be passionate about whatever it is that you're passionate about enough that that's going to give you the fuel to keep going. That's going to give you the fuel to keep going. And I love the fact that you are blessing the Geniuses Common Movement with this type of platform where I can even go into the minutia of what it takes to run a movement. Because in terms of the spirit of the time or the zeitgeist of the time, we're in that time of movements, right? And why is that? Because whenever, historically speaking, you have a cleft between the rich and the poor, the have and the have-nots, that's where you get the plethora of literature, whether it's through the old, classic slave Negro, the literature with the classic slave Negro spirituals, right? Or whatever. Art has always been an indispensable tool of revolutionary struggle. The Panther Party said that. And so Dr. Sonia Sanchez said that all art is political, right? See, but people of so-called color, people of African descent, we were never given the luxury of art for the sake of art. For us, art has always been a cajoler of history. It's always been rooted in survival, right? We didn't have the luxury like certain other races had where art is for the sake of art. No, for us, it was about topsy-turvy dolls that we had to, have that doll flip from black to white, okay? So people didn't know what we were doing or that we were playing with black dolls. We had to identify ourselves. We were fighting for that sense of identity, and we used art to do that. We used art for survival, right, as well.
Yeah.
With the whole quilting. The quilting basically was all about following the Northern Star. So on the outside, our overseers would see a quilt and say, oh, okay, that's a quilt, blah, 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 right? Not realizing, but that quilt was a map to freedom. Right. So we've always used art as a way to survive, and it was rooted in survival. If you will.
Yeah, I want to point something out. I have two more points that I want to make, and then I have to ask you another question that we ask every guest.
Sure.
So you talk about art or the arts, and that brings me to maybe number 6, I think we're on, that sometimes there needs to be a spokesperson. And a lot of times that is sort of an artist, whether that is a celebrity or a, ball player or whoever, an influential person. So, because that's what I've seen, like movements really take flight when a spokesperson gets involved. Now, that doesn't necessarily say that has to happen. But I've seen, and you've mentioned with your movement, there are already 66 celebrities associated with it. And that takes it a little bit further, not to judge our people that we need a celebrity to get us on board towards a movement that really means something. But if we're honest, a lot of times that is what it takes. What are your thoughts around that?
No, I agree. And fortunately and unfortunately, this is the world that we're living in. People have a tendency to feed into the whole celebrityism. People have a tendency to fan out. If they see you on television, then you're somebody, right? But the celebrities are the icing on the cake. The cake is that young lady from a housing project that Michael Bray's hair like Picasso painted. That's her genius, right? And you see, God.
I'm sorry. Say that. Say that again. Something about braiding hair. Like, I want to slow that down. I want to hear what you just said.
I'm a New Yorker, so I talk a little fast. Pardon me. So, like, I said that the celebrities are the icing on the cake, right? But they're not the cake. The cake is that young lady from a housing project that Michael Bray's hair like Picasso painted. That's her genius.
Right.
And see, God has this amazing sense of humor where he gives us this so-called free will to do what we want to do, but the fine print reads, until you do what I instilled in you to do, you'll never be happy and you'll never find purpose.
Oh my gosh. Right? Okay, hold on.
Uh-huh.
We gotta dig there. And that was not part of the plan. But that, what you just said right there is so freaking important. It's a big part of why I started this podcast, because, and my program overall, is because so many people are unhappy. And the reason why they're unhappy is because they're ignoring their calling, their purpose, the movement that they're supposed to start.
There you go. Absolutely.
So glad
and that's
you said
why he
that.
said, I appreciate you. That's why he said, lean not towards your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will direct your path.
Right.
Right.
So if you're
And so,
sitting over there
mhm,
unhappy, unfulfilled, dissatisfied, all of these words, it's likely because there's a movement inside of you that you're not starting. And the movement doesn't mean that tens of millions of people get involved. It might mean
exactly.
your community, but you got to start it. It's in you and you got to go.
And you,
Otherwise, you will always be unhappy.
absolutely. Wow, the way you phrase that is so dope and so true, because there are a lot of people that are walking around with movements inside of themselves. You're so right. They have these
Mhm.
movements inside of themselves that is not tapped into, not moved on, right? And so as a result of that, they get depressed, they feel unfulfilled, they have no purpose in life. It's because they didn't listen to that still voice. You don't even have to believe in God. Just listen to that still voice that's inside of you.
Right.
That's saying, don't go left, go right. Don't go right, go left. All
Yeah.
that sense of agitation, whatever it is that you feel, and turning that into purpose,
Yeah.
turning your pain into purpose. But what a lot of people would do is they'll turn their pain into pain. No, turn your pain into purpose, right?
Right.
Good morning heartache. I mean, come on, Lady Day said the best. Good morning heartache. She turned her pain into purpose.
Hmm.
She turned her pain into her man, into her mate. Good morning heartache. She
Hmm.
turned it into her lover, right?
Hmm.
And so the
Yeah.
thing about it is, it's about being able to flip the script of wherever you are currently. And like Garvey said the best, up you mighty people, you can accomplish what you will. You can accomplish what you will. Whatever you put out there, if you're passionate about something, if your why to is big enough, you can overcome any how to.
Yes.
But you
Victor
have to have a
Frankl.
big enough
No,
why.
that
You
was
have to have a big
Nietzsche.
enough why to. You have to have a big enough why you're doing what you're doing. If that's big enough, you can overcome any how to go about doing it.
Absolutely. I do know that Nietzsche quote. You're the
Oh, okay, there you go.
quoteologist, but I'll say I do know that one.
There you go. There you go. And I forgot who even said it. That's why I didn't even mention the
Yeah,
person's
it
name.
was Nietzsche.
But
And
yeah,
we use it in our program because why
okay.
is a big part of our program. We talk about wealth, wellness,
So,
and what we call
so
wow. And wow
okay.
stands for why power over willpower.
I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
Why power over willpower? That's pretty dope.
Yeah, because willpower will always fail you, but why
That's
power
true.
will fuel you. You talked about that
That's
fuel.
true. That's true.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
in terms of getting back to movements and creating movements, once you land and find out what the issue is, which is very easy, once you know what the issue is, and then you start galvanizing yourself around that, then you position and leverage yourself. Because when we talk about celebrities being a catalyst to moving a movement, that's because it comes from, as far as my tactic and what I use with the Geniuses Common movement, in terms of going after the celebrities, in terms of them being the icing on the cake and not the cake. There's a thing called position and leverage, is what my mantra is. Position and leverage. You position yourself with powerful people, and then you leverage them towards more powerful people, and then you leverage them towards more powerful people. For instance, I have an anthology called The Bandana Republic, which is a literary anthology by gang members and their affiliates. It's poetry, prose, short stories, and quotes, and interviews from gang members, gang leaders, and those affiliated. Soft Skull Press published it. I had the kahunas to publish it in 2008. And when we did our public book signing at Human Bookstore in Harlem, it was like a scene out of The Warriors, because only gang members showed up because the general public was scared to come
mm,
to the book signing, right?
mm,
And the funny thing about it, and interesting thing about it, is that there was no drama. And as a matter of fact, the Crips and the Bloods at the end of the book signing went to Harlem Lanes to have a bowl off, and it was a tie between the Crips and the Bloods, right? And so so the thing is, so how I built the Bandana Republic, which is a literary anthology by gang members and their affiliates, poetry, prose, short stories, and quotes and interviews. The way I built it is this: first had the Bloods, okay, had affiliation with the Bloods, and then from the Bloods I got the Crips. From the Crips I got the Latin Kings. From the Latin Kings I got the Nietas, and then I got La Familia, and then I got the Northerners and the Southerners, and then the Viceroys, and I got the People Nation, and the next thing you know, they're all under one umbrella, which is the Bandana Republic, right? And
mhm.
so, I mean, we have every street traveler, street organization you can imagine in it. Jim Brown wrote the foreword to it and said it's one of the most best, well-researched books he's ever read. And he wrote that in the foreword. The Crips, Bloods, Latin Kings, Northerners, Southerners, it was smuggled into the security housing unit at Pelican Bay, and the Mexican Mafia blessed it. In reference to all transparency, I come out of gang culture, been in several of them. I'm not proud of my past, but I'm not ashamed of my past. I used to do stick-ups. I was wild. I was young, skinny, wild, very brazen. I wouldn't be a part of your gang if you weren't the most brazen one, right? But God blessed me to turn my life around. So getting back to position and leverage, when you have a movement, what you want to do is you want to position and leverage yourself with powerful people that have influence, that can come on board with your movement to give it that much more life. It's the same thing with Def Poetry Jam, right? With Def Poetry Jam, if it was Bruce George presents Def Poetry Jam, it wouldn't have went anywhere because I wasn't known, right? So I had to seek out celebrities as a way to get their name behind it. And if Russell Simmons didn't bite, FUBU was up next, right? And then I went to RZA of the Wu-Tang Clan. He turned me down because I was gonna call it Spoken Wu. I went to Staten Island, met the RZA at his studio, and he turned me down. And then the next up at bat, if Russell didn't bite, was FUBU. And they're going to show you how dated this thing is.
Right.
And then Russell wound up biting, and the rest is history. I brought the concept of Danny Simmons, who brought it to Russell Simmons, who brought it to HBO. So position and leverage is the key for you to be able to get a lot of grind in a short period of time in terms of whatever it is that you are putting out. Whatever it is that you're putting out, you want to be able to really position and leverage yourself with people that are making noise, people that have influence, and people that have visibility.
Exactly. So good. Yep. Now I want to make one more point, and then I want you to tell people where they can get in touch with you, and then I have one more question for you. So the point I want to make is that a lot of times when people think about a movement, they think about this being sort of like a nonprofit organization. And a lot of our listeners, pretty much all of our listeners, are entrepreneurs. And I want to make the distinction or press upon you that a movement can be your business. Like our business is our movement.
Absolutely.
I started Presidential Lifestyle with this idea because I was a woman who understood men, and I was bridging the gap between women and men in these arguments. And I, would sit with men and listen to their, I guess you would call it, their issues with women. And then I would bring that back to women and say, well, maybe you misunderstood him, because women have, let's just say, 1 million words to use a day. And men, for example, purposes, have like 500,000. So when a man says something, and it's 5 words, but a woman adds 5 extra words to it, she completely changes the sentence that he said. And so what I noticed is that stress comes from misunderstanding. It comes from a couple of different places. Misunderstanding is one place. Trying to figure it out is the second place. And so most of the things that we are dealing with when it comes to stress is either we're trying to figure something out, we're trying to take control of something, or we're misunderstanding it. And that is what causes us stress. And so this was something I noticed. And then I was like, this has got to change, but I didn't want to do it for free. So I was like, I'm making a business out of it. And that's my movement. Many of our listeners and many of the people who have been on this podcast have had a movement. We had a dentist, a billionaire dentist, and he really had a movement that he started. And I was like, one, on the dentist side, like dentists really need to fall in love with being a dentist, because it is a prestigious job to have, even though they didn't have it before he made being a dentist sexy. And then not only that, he also brought to people who didn't have a beautiful smile, he gave them a beautiful smile so that they can smile every day. Because let me tell you, I get compliments on my smile on a daily basis. And it's part of it is because of him, because he is my dentist. And he put that into my life, that I get those compliments and I can take that and add to the confidence that I already have. But movements like that are businesses, that's $1 billion company he built. So it doesn't have to be a nonprofit organization, or it really can be a business. So I want to make sure that the listeners understand that we're not saying do something besides the thing that you're already doing, because maybe your business is your movement and you just need to do it on a level that allows you to make some moves and really and create some change.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you said that, because what I want your listening audience to understand is the fact that the status quo would love for us to feed into the starving artist mentality, right? Where does the starving artist mentality come from? A lot of people don't realize it. That was a tool that was designed by the status quo to keep us starving. As long as you're starving, you don't have a voice. As long as you're starving, you are cut out. I told you one of the things that I specialize is in power. And there's a quote that says the ability to include, power is the ability to include or exclude, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's about inclusion. It's not about empire building. It's about legacy building. If anything, I'm about tearing down empires, because it is exclusive. It's not inclusive. Mm-hmm. So the status quo would love for the artist to be starving, because as long as you're starving, guess what? You don't have a voice. So let's look at the arts and sciences. The arts and sciences should really be called sciences and sciences, because they killed the art. Why did they kill the arts? Because the artist, as I stated earlier, has always been a threat to the status quo, has always been the flamethrower, has always been the cajoler of history, has always been the outlaw, right? And so that's the deal behind that, the artist has always been a threat to any movement, to any status quo. Every revolutionary, when you talk about revolutions, whether it's the Russian Revolution, British Revolution, African Revolution, any type of revolutions, the poet they were a poet first. The leaders of these revolutions, the Cuban Revolution, they were poets first.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yep.
Mao was a poet. Che Guevara was a poet. All of them were poets first. Mm-hmm. And so they would love for us to be starving. So we need to understand that fact. Yes, you can have a movement. You can have a movement, and you can have capital. If you don't have the capital, you get the what? Punishment, right? Capital, punishment. If you don't have the capital, you get the punishment. So the Genius is Coming movement, it's a grassroots movement, but at the same token, we create jobs every single day. Every single day we create jobs, and it generates capital, because you have to have capital in order to keep things moving. God says in the Bible, money answereth all things. Mm-hmm. Money answereth all things, right? So you need the capital in order for you to get anything off the ground and up and running. And so, yes, absolutely. We create jobs. Yeah, absolutely. We have a part of the movement where people are spreading the movement, and they're getting paid to do so. And so, yeah, you must have the capital, because if you don't have the capital, you'll get the punishment.
Yes, I'm so glad we got to pull that point out. So, guys, as you hear, you may already have a movement started. You may be in the middle of your movement, and it may be time for you to take it to the next level. Maybe you have another movement inside of you, like Bruce here, who was part of a movement that maybe didn't agitate enough. And so he's on to his next movement. And that might be where you are. Wherever it is, there's no guilt in where you've been. Just take today to go where it is. It's time for you to go. And also know that if you need to, like we said before, if you need to leverage your network, do that. And don't feel any guilt about the capital that it takes. Because a lot of times these millionaires and billionaires, there is some guilt around it. So if there is some guilt around it, what do you need to do to shift that guilt? Like Carnegie, he opened all the universities and libraries to get over the guilt he had on having all that money. What do you need to do? What are you going to do to turn your money into meaning? So I'm leaving you with that idea. I'm going to have Bruce tell us, where can people get in touch with you, get connected with Genius is Coming? Maybe they want to make a video themselves and add to the movement. Tell us about how people can connect with you. And then I have one more question for you.
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, I really appreciate the platform. Again, Kanae, I cannot thank you enough for allowing the Genius is Coming movement, by way of myself, to be on your platform. And I cannot thank the listeners enough for listening in. I'm Googleable. You just put Bruce George in Google, and I'm all over the place. And so I would implore your audience to go to geniusiscommon.com. That's www.geniusiscommon.com, and check out our website. And you're going to see we have a bookstore, an events page, partners page. The whole nine. We have a Black Inventors page. We just launched our Black Inventor Initiative, our Genius Black Inventor Initiative. You cannot have a Genius is Common movement without talking about Black inventors. That would be blasphemous. So we have that page. We have our Facebook group that has over 19,000. We had 32,000, but Facebook cut all groups in half from being sued by their shareholders, and they wanted to save money on bandwidth. So we're rebuilding. We have over 19,000. We had 32,000. We're on the rise. So I would implore them to go to geniusiscommon.com. They can put my name in Google, and they can reach out to me through geniusiscommon.com. I do coaching and everything like that, so they can definitely reach out if they want some coaching. I coach in a very unorthodox way because I study so much, and I come from so many different vantage points, because one's culture plus experience equals one's frame of reference. So it's safe to say I have a wide frame of reference. So I think that's why people appreciate my coaching. And then also they can reach out to you, Kanae, as well, because you are a part of the Genius is Common movement, and we're proud of that fact. So if people want to learn about the Genius is Common movement, they can also reach out to you, where you can have them connect directly with me.
Do that. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be dope. And
Yes.
if anybody wants to do a Genius is Common video, reach out to Kanae, and she'll tell you how to get in contact with her, and then she'll set up a conference call between myself and that person.
Absolutely. So I'll put that in the show notes, guys. And before I ask you our last question, I'll just wrap up to say, fall in love with the movement that is inside of you. There is a movement inside of you. You know it. I know it. And it's time for you to fall in love with it, so that you can identify the cause, or that bigger picture that you want to fight against or call some attention to, whether it's big or small. And then talk about it. Just talk to anybody who will listen and everybody who will listen. And then once you finish talking about it, put it on trial, take some action, be about it, and create the urgency around it. Continue to agitate, and
That's right.
leverage your network, your influencers, even if you don't know them. Sometimes your movement is all they need to give meaning to their life. So don't be afraid to ask them, because you never know. Many people are looking for a movement to get behind, and yours might be the one. And remember your why, your passion, the reason why you're doing this all the way through, even especially in the times when it gets tough and maybe people are ignoring you. And one of the things we didn't talk about is the stress that goes along with being a visionary. But I want to bring it up briefly here, is that you will be ignored. You will be overlooked. You will be laughed at even. But you got to have that faith in Job, like you said.
You're right about the stress piece. When you're running a movement, especially when you're like at the forefront of that movement, people are going to take pop shots at you. So you can't be thin-skinned. But Garvey said it best. He said, men in earnest don't concern themselves with consequences, right? You really, 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 really have to you can't be thin-skinned. You have to really, really be into what you're about and be about what you're about, and you have to make enough noise and realize that when you do make enough noise, you're going to get blowback. Okay, you're going to get blowback. But you know what, though? I'm fearless with mine, because it's not about who I am, it's about whose I am. So I'm a child of God. Okay, and if God is for me, who could be against me? But I want your audience to listen to this. When your movement really starts gaining a lot of traction, this is what the status quo would do. First, there's the 4 Ds. First, they will dismiss you. So they'll become very dismissive. And then as you go higher and higher up, right, then they will discredit you, right? And then after they discredit you, they will demonize you. As you go a little higher up, they will demonize you. And then last but not least, they will try to, and I say try to, destroy you. Because, and the reason why I said try it is because, if God is for you, who could be against you? Right? I'm a praying man. I'm a child of God, right? And so, I worship a heavenly Father that got me. So I don't walk around in fear. I walk around in faith, right? Faith is fear is for the godless and the faithless. So our ancestors perished the thought if they were just thinking about consequences. If they thought about the consequences, they wouldn't have did what they did. They wouldn't have sacrificed their lives and jobs and everything else. Oh, if I do this, this is going to happen. If I do this, I'm going to lose my job. If I do this, I'm going to lose my life. If I do this, my house is going to be burned. If they were to think in terms of consequences, we wouldn't be where we are today. And Dante, in his piece, The Inferno, he said the hottest places in hell is reserved for those who are in a position of moral crisis who maintain their neutrality. You can't stay neutral when that moral compass starts coming to your consciousness, or when you have to face your moral compass, you can't stay neutral. Okay? And those that try to stay neutral and burn, try to play both fences, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. You're going to have to either mess or get off the pot. And, I love resting at night knowing that I'm true to who I am and I'm true to what I'm about. I can look myself in the mirror. I could be broken and broke financially, but I could look myself in the mirror and say, you know what? I did right by my people. I did right by myself. I did right by God. I was obedient.
Yeah.
Right? That's rich. A lot of you, listeners, very wealthy financially, but are you rich in spirit? Are you rich in morality? Are you rich in integrity? All money is not good money. Okay? All money is not good money. I've turned money down so quickly. Faster than the cat can lick his behind. I'm like Malcolm Gladwell's the outlier. I'm one of those outliers. Money doesn't move me. What moves me is movement. What moves me is spirit. What moves me is purpose. That's what moves me. That's what I get
like
off
we
on.
say here on the Presidential Experience podcast, meaning. So we turn our money into meaning. Yes.
It's a meaning.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I'm really glad that we did take a few minutes to go into the stress. And I like the D's that you shared: the dismiss, the discredit, the demonize, and then the
And then destroy.
destroy. Yeah, and it reminds me of like the Gandhis, the Martin Luther King's, Malcolm X, any of the greats, and you think by assassinating them that you are destroying them, but I mean, we're still talking about Gandhi, we're still talking about Malcolm X, we're still talking about Martin Luther King.
Kill a revolutionary. What did Fred Hampton say? You could kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution.
Exactly. Right.
Exactly.
So, and it's a lot to give. I mean, you said you're a praying man, so even Jesus, and so
that's right.
It's a lot to give. And as we're recording this, it's Lent.
Exactly.
Lent is one of my favorite. Lent is all about sacrifice. So I was born Muslim. I converted to Christianity when I was 5 in order to go to private school.
Amen.
And then when I was 15 years old, I converted to metaphysics, or what you talked about, that like Abraham Hicks kind of movement. And this was even before the Abraham Hicks. This was in 80s. And so because of that, I have a little bit of all different religions in me because of what I studied, but Lent stuck. And I love Lent because it's all about sacrifice. And that is what starting a movement. And I want to end on the question we always ask. But starting a movement is really about sacrifice and being able to give up that the need to be lazy, give up that need to be quiet, give up that need to be comfortable. Because when you start a movement, there is that discomfort. There is that you gotta move. You're gonna be agitated, and you're gonna be agitating people. So I just wanted to mention that what you said, there is going to be some backlash and it will be stressful, but you can push through it. Your why is what will get you through it. But just know that it comes with a certain amount of sacrifice.
Yeah, so you have to have the sacrifice. Frederick Douglass for the best. Frederick Douglass said the best. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Never will, never did, and never will. Period. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Demand of your time, demand of your money, demand of your energy, demand of the stress cells that you go through, whatever you're going through. And you have to be prepared for whatever. For
Yep.
whatever. You see,
Exactly.
and God says in the Bible, fear drives a snare. So whatever you fear is what you're going to drive to you.
Yep.
Okay. So I
So
don't fear death. I don't fear none of that. I'm like a bullhorn when it comes to, my movement and what I'm about.
yeah,
I'm a
awesome.
bullhorn. When I created the Bandana Republic, right? A literary anthology by gang members. I didn't say a literary anthology by the Boy Scouts. I said a literary anthology by gang members.
Mhm.
Period. And if I was fearful, I would have said the Boy Scouts or whatever. You know what I mean? I would have said
Yeah.
Boy Scouts. No, gang members and their affiliates, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, if that didn't put me on the government's radar, I'm sure I'm on it now. And if I'm not on it now, then I would be very highly disappointed.
Right.
Highly disappointed.
So take us
Okay.
out. Yeah. So take us out with this last question. And that is, what is the best advice you ever received or the advice you wish somebody would have told you?
Well, the best advice for me is that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. That is the best advice. That is the best advice I've ever received, is having Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And just really being able to latch on to that and have faith in that. And, that was one, like the quintessential, that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. That turned my whole life around. I, like you, was a Muslim, and then it just didn't sit right with my spirit. After a while, it was very perfunctory, and it was very routine-ish, and it just didn't sit right with my spirit. And then I was spirit-led, to where I am today. And so I would say that's it right there. That's it. Just
All
being
right.
able to receive that awakening and that consciousness.
Yes, thank you for sharing that with us. I want to thank you for spending this time with us, for pouring out your heart, everything you
Loved
have.
it.
One thing I will say, you are not selfish when it comes to giving. You pour it all out there. So thank you for
Appreciate
sharing
that.
with us and giving us some of your passion today.
It was my pleasure to share. And actually, this is my work ministry. This is what I do. So I'm obligated. I get no extra credit for this. I'm supposed to do this.
Yes.
We're supposed to do this. Our work is our ministry, and I'm a firm believer in that.
Yes.
There are a lot more ordained ministers out of church than in church. You see somebody flipping burgers, that's an ordained minister. You see somebody cleaning the streets, that's an ordained minister. You see somebody cleaning toilets, that's an ordained minister. Respect them. There's no such thing as menial jobs. That is an elitist-driven concept, that there are menial jobs. There's no such thing as a menial job. Period.
Absolutely.
Right? Your work is your
Yes.
ministry. Dr. King said it best: if you're nothing but a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper. Right?
Mhm.
And perish the thought if we didn't have street sweepers. Perish the thought if we didn't have people to clean hotels and to clean the sewage systems or manage the sewage systems or whatever. Perish the thought if we didn't have people doing agriculture or things that people deem as being low or menial. If we didn't have those individuals, where would the world be?
Yeah,
So I want to
totally.
thank you, Kanae, for having me on your show. Again, thanking listeners for listening in. Up you mighty people, you can accomplish what you will, Garvey, right? And genius is coming.
Absolutely. And on that note, I'll leave it there. I'll just leave it there. Thank you guys for joining us, and I'll see you next week.
Feeling stressed? Wondering what's it all about? Well, you're not alone. And maybe you're not ready for a private conversation yet. Take the Life of Meaning quiz. It's the first step in determining how close or far you are in creating a life of meaning. A study revealed 76% of Americans reported feeling stress either some or all of the time in the last 30 days. The number one cause of that stress was money, not because they don't have it, but because they want more of it. But life is about more than money. It's about meaning. So take the Life of Meaning quiz and move toward peace and away from stress. It's just a click away. Go to presidentiallifestyle.com/meaning-quiz. You'll get the answers you've been looking for. You'll determine how close or far you are from creating a life of meaning. How does that sound? Then click the link. The link is in the show notes. Go to presidentiallifestyle.com/meaning-quiz. Go now. If you're not quite ready for a private conversation, start here. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Want to reduce your stress even more? Here are 4 ways you can do it. 1, send us your questions. Ask us anything about money, marriage, or maturing. You can send it to podcast@presidentiallifestyle.com. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast. You wouldn't want to miss an episode. That would be stressful. And number 3, get our Prosperity Report recap. It's a free resource where we share top tools and resources. Just go to presidentiallifestyle.com/blog/prosperity report. Don't worry, it's in the show notes. You won't have to remember that. And 4, if you really want to connect with us in a deep and powerful way, join our private club. Go to joinpresidentialexperience.com to find out when our doors open again. We want you to be there so you can turn your money into meaning. And if you're enjoying this podcast, go ahead and leave us a rating and a comment, and we'll be sure to thank you. And now for the legalese. Remember, this podcast is not to replace professional counsel. The best advice comes from a professional you know. The topics discussed in this podcast are general in nature and are for informational and entertainment purposes only. We encourage you to meet with a professional that you can discuss your specific situation with, whether therapeutic or otherwise. That's all for now. I'll see you next episode. And remember, you can have wealth in all of its forms. Believe it, and you will soon see it.